Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 11th of September 2019, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. Your host today, Mike Robinson, myself, Brian Gerrish. Well, we're hoping for a live report from just outside Westminster, I think.
Well, we are in 1 second, but let's just introduce it with this guy. This is Lord Carloway, who's Scotland's top judge, and he has decided that the prorogation of Parliament was unlawful because it had the purpose of stymying Parliament, is what he claims. 3 judges chaired by Lord Carloway. As I say, this is Scotland's most senior judge and big supporter of the Scottish National Party, has overturned the ruling last week that the courts didn't have the power to interfere in the decision to prorogue Parliament. Well, what was really interesting about this, we get a clue from Keir Starmer here, who said, I welcome the court's judgment. No one in their right mind believed Boris Johnson's reasons for shutting down Parliament. Well, basically the reason that the judge seems to have come to this decision is because, as I say, Boris has had the purpose of stymying Parliament. In other words, he's looking into Boris's mind, Brian, and making a decision about what his intentions were. This is thought crime. But anyway, it heads off to the Supreme Court now for them to make a decision, because the Scottish court would not actually put any kind of interdict or injunction on the situation. It will go to the Supreme Court for a final decision. And it's incredible that this has been permitted to happen, I think.
Yeah, well, we're living in very turbulent times. I think we can have a bit more comment on that in a second.
In a second. Now, in the meantime, of course, as Brian alluded to a second ago, Parliament may be prorogued, but outside Parliament at the moment is the GcMAF Awareness event. And so, well, this is all a bit ad hoc because it's quite noisy there, quite a lot of people at the event. But let me see if I can welcome Ian R. Crane to the programme. Can you hear us, Ian, okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. There's a lot of background noise here, and hopefully there's not too much wind noise. But yeah, I'm here with David, and I don't know, probably 200 people have come from all over the country to support David today.
Okay, superb. Ian, if you could just move to your left a little bit, because we can't see you at all at the moment. That's okay, better. How's that? So what's the response from the crowd been like?
What's the response from the crowd been like, David?
Yes.
Absolutely fabulous. I mean, people have travelled a long way. They've all made their own banners and their own T-shirts, and there's a very, very strong feeling here.
And what kind of response are you getting from the public then?
Quite a lot of interest, but we went to the 3 political party offices. We emailed them and telephoned them so they would receive us. The Conservative Party knew nothing about it. I had to force my way through the gate and hand our literature into a doorman, and the literature describes what cancer does and describes the fact the MHRA have illegally put the innocent Linda Thayer into a French jail, and they want to put me in a French jail next. All illegal. Then we went to the Brexit Party. Well, they either didn't tell me they had moved offices, or they lied and they would not accept our presentation. It's a terrible blow to the prestige of the Brexit Party. They don't even admit that they are at 83 Victoria Street, or they've moved somewhere else. We got absolutely nowhere. And finally, the Labour Party, there was an obstructive woman, a sales prevention officer, the worst kind of a woman you can ever meet, who not only refused to accept our presentation, but would not allow us to meet anyone. So there we have 3 political parties that don't care a damn about the British people. And we found, when we emailed the MPs, we've emailed a dozen MPs, there's been 20 of us emailing MPs, so we've emailed 20 ministers and 20 MPs, and beyond automated replies, we have never had a reply from an MP or a minister. Never. It's a disgrace. This really is a dictatorship. No one cares about the British people. And meanwhile, 2 million people have died of cancer since GcMAF was discovered in the 1980s, and Parliament and the MHRA have concealed it from the public, as you can see on the website mhracorrupt.st. GcMAF's website is Golf Charlie Mike Alpha Foxtrot Sierra Echo, gcmaf.se, and you might like to go to YouTube and see Terry Davis Newman, Teridavis Newman, who's made a 6-minute video which encaptures the whole thing. So Linda Thayer is still in prison. I'm due to go to prison. The MHRA murders 200,000 people a year by giving licenses to drugs that kill, 80,000, and by denying people access to safe natural treatments like GcMAF. The MHRA killed 200,000 people a year, and they're proud of it. Over to you.
Good, Ian. Thank you very much for that, and David as well. Now, Ian, just briefly, because we got to move on. But how is your 5G tour going at the moment?
Yeah, well, the tour's got off to a great start. We had an absolutely outstanding crowd in Appledore in North Devon on Saturday, and again in Bristol. And I got to say, your home city, Plymouth, that's a hard nut to crack. But nonetheless, we had, I think, just over 30 people. But the vast majority of people weren't from Plymouth. They were from outside of Plymouth. And I know that tonight I'm heading back down the train line in a little while back to Bournemouth, and I know that we're going to have a lot of interest in Bournemouth, because of course Bournemouth is a target city for 5G, and I'm going to be showing a lot of the promo videos that Ordnance Survey have produced with Bournemouth City Council pushing the 5G agenda. So obviously thanks for your help in making people aware of the 5G tour, Mike and Brian. But before I leave you, the people here just want to express their quest that GcMAF cures cancer. GcMAF cures cancer! GcMAF cures cancer!
Well done. Fantastic stuff.
I think you get the message.
We did. We absolutely got the message. Thank you very much. That's superb.
Well, what can we say, Mike? We talk about the situation in UK where we have a government that is not going to follow the will of the people over Brexit, so we shouldn't be surprised that it's not going to look after people in a medical sense. And Scottish judges come out and make a decision where we've got Scotland, which has amalgamated its police forces into one single police force, so that, of course, you've got no separation of powers whatsoever. We're living in pretty dangerous times, I think.
And it's going to get more interesting because let's head over to the European side of things. And meet Sylvie Goulard, who is the new directorate, or in charge of the new Directorate General for Defence, Security and Space. Defence Industry and Space, sorry. So she's a former member of the European Parliament. She is apparently, according to them, a dedicated and convinced European. And she has been made today the Internal Market Commissioner because the new President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has appointed all her new commissioners. So she's going to become the Internal Market Commissioner, and she will lead work on industrial policy and promote the digital single market. But she's also been given responsibility for the new Directorate General for Defence, Industry and Space. So what's this all about? Well, the EU's Defence Union project will get its own offices, its own space. And here is Ursula herself. And writing to Ms. Goulard, she has said Europe's €100 billion a year. Defence industry is one of our most valuable and strategic assets. And she said that the DG Defence will speed up work on creating a joint military-industrial complex, and will focus on high-tech items such as drones, artificial intelligence. And this is all in the letter that she sent. Now, of course, this is something that we've been trying to highlight for a very long time now. That Defence Union is not just about control, single point command and control of military in the UK and the rest of the European Union. It's also about the defence industry, but she didn't stop there, because she's written to all the new commissioners, but she also wrote to this one, Josep Borrell, who is Spanish. He's the new High Representative of the European Union on Foreign Policy. He replaces Federica Mogherini. So he is High Representative of the Union Foreign Policy and Security Policy, and his main purpose is a stronger Europe in the world. That's what he's working towards. And to him, she wrote this: we need to take further bold steps in the next 5 years towards a genuine European defence union. She said the European Union member states have been told many times that common procurement for their armed forces is of utmost importance. And she said that this will be a geopolitical commission, and that he should seek to strengthen the Union's capacity to act autonomously. So intervention is something that's absolutely on this lady's mind. And she went on to say, we must overcome unanimity constraints that hamper our foreign policy. You should seek to use the clauses in the EU treaties that allow certain decisions to be adopted by qualified majority voting. So what she is aiming to do here is to get rid of the veto on defence that European countries have, and replace it with a qualified majority vote on any action that the European Union would take militarily. So if this isn't underlining everything that we've been saying for a number of years on the European Union and what their intentions are with respect to defence, then it should be underlining things for people. But if anybody has any doubt, then please head over to the UK Column website and have a look at this article, EU Defence Union Spelt Out, by a new President of the Commission. She's still President-elect, of course, for another week or two. That article has some very interesting video from her explaining exactly what her intentions are as far as the European Union defence is concerned. She said, just one other point here, Brian, that she said the European Union member states have been told many times the common procurement is for their armed forces is utmost importance. The European Union will never be a military alliance. NATO will always be our collective defence. But she said that nonetheless, they will head for single point command and control because, of course, it won't be a military alliance. It will be single point command and control, and member states will have no say over how their militaries are deployed.
Exactly, and it's clearly a lie to say that this is in competition to NATO, because this is creating a parallel structure, and the moment it comes under single point control, they've achieved the European superstate. But to have their ultimate military dream, they have to have that EU control over nuclear weapons. And this brings us into the whole subject of the fact that it is clear that behind the scenes UK military, and that will ultimately include nuclear defence, plus special forces, plus intelligence services, plus defence procurement and defence industries, are still being locked into this EU system.
And just one other key point on this, if you do look at this article on the UK Column website and listen carefully to what Ms von der Leyen is saying, she is talking about, once again, the merging of military and civilian functions under this single point command and control. And one of the other points that we've been making is that this is not just about external action and external intervention in Africa, which is the area that she's particularly interested in. It's also about internal security and defence, and what are the implications for member states if the European Union at an EU level makes decisions about where military are deployed internally.
Yeah, well, and let's follow on with this article, bearing in mind the warnings about what's been happening with an EU unified defence procurement system. So this is the Daily Mail, talking about the takeover of defence industry, what it calls defence industry giant Cobham. And this could pose a risk to UK's national security. Now, what is strange about this article is the fact that this is one of very many incidences where we've got British defence industry capability being taken over by either American interests or subsumed into the European Union system. and the creation of a consortium of pan-European countries. So this one's come up. It's this company Cobham that does some very specialist work, including air-to-air refueling. And the company that's looking to take them over is Advent International, which you quickly identified as a huge American hedge fund. So what's happening here? Have a look at the comments, and this one's particularly interesting from Cobham. The UK has embraced a free and open defence market where value for money has been a significant consideration for mod procurement decisions rather than the national identity of the supplier. So we've now got a system where we don't really care about national security. It's just the price we're going to pay for a piece of equipment. And if it can be produced cheaper by Germany or Italy or any other European country or the Americans, then that's what we're going to buy. So this is enslaving ourselves to a world global defence system, it seems to me. This is what Advent said. As a future owner, Advent would look to grow Cobham, including in the UK. Now that gets challenged, and the man that the Mail has brought forward is Alan West. Now, this man is getting a bit long in the tooth. I know this because he's the same vintage as I am. And what fascinates me is there's no comment from government. There's no comment from the Defence Minister. There's no comment from senior politicians. There's silence from the government in UK. So they have to pull the former First Sea Lord out of bed. He said this: if ever there was a time for Britain to take risks with its defence industries, now is not it. As a former Chief of Naval Staff and Home Office Minister with responsibility for security matters, I'm deeply concerned at how the US private equity business Advent International has swooped in and proposed a $4 billion takeover of Britain's defence giant Cobham plc. And he goes on to say, I'm therefore concerned that Advent does not intend to be a long-term strategic owner of Cobham. In fact, I've little doubt that Cobham will be broken up and sold to the highest bidder. One figure quoted is that it does less than 5% of its business with the Ministry of Defence. But what this hides is that Cobham owns 13.3% of Air Tanker Holdings, a different company which owns and maintains Voyager aircraft, the largest in the RAF fleet. It's time for the government to think again, to stand up for Britain's sovereign capability. This is a British business we cannot afford to lose. So I don't know whether Alan West is well informed or not very well informed, but he's on the right lines with this company. But all around this particular episode, we've got other industries simply dissolved into the EU. We recently had the announcement of Babcock getting an order for the Type 31 frigates, as if this was good for the UK, when in fact Babcock is already in a consortium with Krupp. So we've got German, which is EU involvement. And what's more fascinating is the article quoted Mr. Heseltine. He said no other country in the world would allow serious defence contractors to be sold off without proper scrutiny, especially the United States. But of course, this is the same Michael Heseltine who back in the 80s wanted to sell off Westland helicopters to European interests.
And this is the same Michael Heseltine who is an absolute Europhile and absolutely, to my knowledge, agrees 100% with the European consolidation of defence industry as von der Leyen is pushing forward today.
Yeah, so what have we got here? Is this just ignorance in the people putting the article together that they focus on one, or is this deliberately misleading reporting to take eyes off what's happening with the EU Defence Union? We can't say, but you can see the holes in the argument.
Okay, let's move on. If you like what the UK Column does and you'd like to support us, then please head over to ukcolumn.org/community, where there are options for how you can do that there. Now, good news came out yesterday because Donald Trump did this. I informed John Bolton. He tweeted out last night that his services are no longer needed at the White House. I disagreed strongly with many of his suggestions, as did others in the administration, and therefore I asked John for his resignation, which was given to me this morning. I thank John very much for his service I'll be running a new, or naming a new national security advisor next week. Lots of enthusiasm about this decision amongst many, many people because, of course, John Bolton, an absolute war hawk, he was, up until this point, tweeting out anti-Iran tweets on his National Security Advisor Twitter account, anti-Iran tweets and Afghanistan tweets and all kinds of stuff as usual. But as soon as Trump had pushed this out, he decided to get his retort in, and he claimed that he had offered to resign the night before and that President Trump had said, let's talk about it tomorrow. So the implication is that Trump had not bothered to wait until tomorrow to have a conversation, had just got rid of him. So there's perhaps a little bit of bitterness in that tweet, but many people delighted to see Bolton gone. In the meantime, I thought I'd draw everybody's attention to a strange story and one that really the mainstream media doesn't seem to be able to agree on. So the New York Times has this: CIA informant extracted from Russia had sent secrets to US for decades. And CNN, here's the Washington Post. When bringing a Cold War spy in from the cold shook all of Moscow, and CNN saying exclusive US extracted top spy from inside Russia in 2017. And it's a bit of a strange story because none of the papers really seem to be able to agree on what actually happened. So they all do agree on one thing, and that is that this alleged spy defected in 2017, that he had been encouraged to defect by the CIA during Obama's presidency in 2016, that he initially refused, but then he agreed to do it. Now CNN says that the extrication happened because there was concern in 2017 that Donald Trump would tell Putin who the spy was. The New York Times and others said that isn't true. They say that this spy was a major source in the Russiagate story, and that, in fact, many journalists knew who the guy was already, and that this was the reason for the extrication. They use this word extrication. The Russians, of course, are saying this. This tale is just so much pulp fiction, according to Dmitry Peskov. They're sort of laughing at the whole thing. Peskov had said that the spy, whose name is Oleg Smolenkov, had worked in the presidential administration but had been sacked himself in 2016. But really, there's perhaps something to watch here, whether it's just the mainstream media trying to continue to flog a dead horse of Russiagate and try to get the last little bits that they can out of it. I don't know, but it's interesting that they seem to be absolutely incapable of actually producing a common narrative on this particular one. And so we'll label it fake news in the meantime, but we'll keep an eye on it and see whether anything else interesting pops up. And sticking with media then, if you remember a couple of months ago, the Foreign Office ran the Defend Media Freedom event. This was a 2-day conference hosted jointly by the UK and Canadian governments. It was held in London, and it cost £2.4 million, so money well spent there. And it was all about defending media freedom and looking after journalists abroad and so on. Well, the Foreign Affairs Select Committee today has released this report. Media freedom is under attack, the FCO's defence of an endangered liberty. And they're saying that it's a good start. This conference was a good start, but the UK needs to go further. They said the Foreign Office has allocated too few resources, given too little detail about how it will fulfil its campaign, and taken too passing an interest in how to make it sustainable. They said that it looks like risks being little more than a public relations exercise, and that the UK hasn't done enough materially to punish the violations of media freedom. It's hardly likely that they will be doing much to punish the violators of media freedom, since the UK government is currently one of the biggest violators of media freedom going. But of course, what was this Defend Media Freedom conference all about, really? It wasn't about defending media freedom. Anyway, this report here from the Foreign Affairs Committee suggests a number of things. First of all, support training for foreign law enforcement organisations to help them to protect journalists. Which journalists is the question? Because, of course, when you look at this Defend Media Freedom programme, it's really about defending the freedom of journalists who are reinforcing the UK government's narrative, and in this case the Canadian government as well, because they're joint partners in this. But they're not really too concerned about journalists who aren't providing a narrative, a Western-backed narrative. On we go. Closer coordination with the Home Office over visas for persecuted journalists, as well as any family members and associates, because goodness knows if you've got people operating on your behalf in foreign countries,
You've got to protect
you've got to protect them, don't you? And put online and digital threats at the heart of its strategy. Absolutely, because this was the other thing that was about. Defend media freedom by censoring any narrative which is an anti-government narrative or a contrary to the government narrative in the UK. Extend funding of the BBC World Service to give greater financial certainty. We've got to make sure that they get more government funding, because £3.6 billion BBC budget isn't enough to make sure that the World Service gets its share. And finally, consider support for an international mechanism to investigate and punish the abuse of journalists if governments will not. So that's what they're recommending. And I think, to be honest, they had journalists in inverted commas like Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe in their minds when this whole mechanism began.
Mike, as you run through that list of bullet points, the word hypocrisy just comes into my mind. The hypocrisy of the British government standing on the world stage and talking about media freedom when it is training journalists to go into particularly the Eastern European states, and it's clearly helping foment breakdown in those societies. It's just appalling. So we ought to encourage people to get hold of that Foreign and Commonwealth Office document and read it for themselves and reflect on what our government is doing in this country. And here we are lecturing the world on media freedom.
Absolutely.
Well, let's have a little look at UK. And this was a story that came out at the end of last week. It was a school in Lewis. And basically, they've adopted gender-neutral uniforms. And certainly the pupils, the girl pupils, not happy about this at all. So some of the teenage girls protested outside the school gates, whereupon the school brought in police. And if you read the article, there were people who were complaining that essentially, although the police did eventually go, there were the police defending the school against teenage girls who were unhappy at being told they couldn't go to school because they dared to wear dresses. Well, if you think this is one-off stuff, it's not. This is now being rolled out across the country. So we were also given a heads up on this Nottinghamshire Live report here, and this is about the teaching of sexual education in one of the Nottingham schools, Shirebrook Academy. It says that they are set for a new trial of a controversial sex education programme. It's the Relationships and Sex Education Material, RSE, which is due to be rolled out across the country in September 2020.
Sorry, you said trial? These children are being used as guinea pigs to trial some new educational technique?
Well, absolutely, and this school is particularly proud of that. We'll get on to that a little bit more. Pupils at the school will be able to give their feedback to the government. I found that a very interesting comment. So the parents gently pushed off to one side, although the government claims there's been consultation, but it's the pupils who'll be able to give their feedback. And the pupils have given some pretty good feedback to date because they've been protesting outside the gates. The curriculum guidelines are changing for the first time in nearly 20 years to introduce new topics such as mental health and online safety. Right. Other topics will include sharing explicit photos and pornography online, sexual and gender identities within families, and the need to respect and protect their relationships. Well, let's have a look at one of the key people. This is Mark Cottingham, the principal of Shirebrook Academy, and he said this: there's been plenty of controversy surrounding the inclusion of topics within the updated RSE curriculum, with parents at some schools unhappy with themes they feel conflict with their personal beliefs. Our school already puts a lot of time and effort into teaching tolerance and acceptance, and we're proud that this commitment means that we have no hesitation in agreeing to become an early adopter. So they know there's been protests. This is what it was about in Birmingham, where uniquely we had Christian, Muslim and Jewish communities all coming together to protest. They didn't want their children being indoctrinated. This man says, yes, we know all that, but we're proud to get this through, and in it comes. He said, we believe it's our duty to support all of our students, but also to, quote, prepare everyone for a world where people have more and more diverse identities. The RSC is not about telling them who or what to be or encouraging one identity above the other, but making them aware of the differences and encouraging empathy and openness in self. Now, these statements, as you see in the government statements, they're contradictory because clearly they are putting an agenda to the forefront. That's the diversity agenda. If you want to stick with the status quo of heterosexual relationships and one-to-one marriage, then this man's policy is not for you. But he's not interested in any other opinion apart from the one that's now going to be pushed through the school.
But if you look at what he says there, also to prepare everyone for a world where people have more and more diverse identities. Who decided that the world was going to be one where more and more people had or where people had more and more diverse identities? Is he suggesting this is a natural evolution, or is there something else going on?
Well, of course he doesn't. If we follow through these sorts of policies, we invariably end up at the United Nations, Mike. But stop before that is, of course, our own government, and this is where the whole thing stems from. At one stage, relationships education, relationships and sex education, RSC, and health education. Information from the Department for Education about the introduction of, quote, compulsory relationships education and RSC from September 2020. So I encourage people to go and have a look at this on the government site. Compulsory relationships education and RSC, and get the facts. So it says, it's introducing this through these subjects. We want to support all young people to be happy, healthy and safe. We want to equip them for adult life and to make a positive contribution to society. Throughout our engagement process as we develop this curriculum, we've heard a number of wide-ranging concerns, most of which they've just simply ignored. So these are some of the questions. Do I have the right to withdraw my child from relationships and sex education? Parents will have a right to withdraw their child from sex education delivered as part of RSE. Then it says in the second paragraph, there's no right to withdraw from relationships education at primary or secondary, as we believe the content of these subjects, such as family, friendship, safety, are important for all children to be taught.
Who's we?
Pardon?
Who's we?
Who is we?
Yes. We believe the content.
Well, this is the advisors for the government, of course. But we know that many people are deeply concerned at what's being taught or what they propose to teach primary school children. But they're being told here clearly by the government, well, you don't count as a parent. We're going to tell you what your child is going to be taught, and you've got no right to withdraw. And then it goes on, will these subjects promote LGBT relationships? No, these subjects don't promote anything, they educate. Well, this is a lie, because the whole of this is promoting a particular agenda, and parents are being told, we're going to get hold of your small children and re-educate them, and you're not going to have a say. So I'm going to say immensely dangerous stuff here. People should read this and see what's happening. Now let's come on to the media. And here's the BBC with Teach, Class Clips, RSE, Understanding Sexual and Gender Identity. And in this film clip, we are to believe the BBC's taken these trusted people, we don't know who they are, and these children are coming out with the most amazing questions about very, very difficult subjects. Now, to my mind, the average 7, 8, 9-year-old does not know these topics. So these topics have been introduced, the pot stirred for the children to then come forward confused and ask questions, and we've got an unknown group of people who are giving the answers. To my mind, immensely dangerous, and as a parent, immensely dangerous. But here's the BBC standing up to say it believes in transparent media, fair media, involved in what I consider to be propaganda. This is one of the documents from the BBC, LGBT culture and progression. I think that's a pretty interesting picture of where the BBC stands on this topic. We're not discussing right or wrong. We're simply saying how much effort is put into a particular topic. And when you get into the detailed document here, it gets very interesting. This is being put across as 10 recommendations that the BBC should adopt. Ensure our customs, practices and recruitment are inclusive to LGBT staff. One indication of this will be the BBC to be included in the Stonewall Top 100 Workplace Equality Index. So there's those sorts of things, but this is the one that really caught my eye. Empower our content, news and radio teams to cover LGBT stories and portrayal and routinely increase the incidental portrayal of LGBT identities.
I'm not clear how the BBC could do any more than they're doing already.
Well,
because
look at what it's talking about. Introduce a reverse mentoring program for team managers and senior leaders involving LGBT staff so that they're more aware of it. So this is bias which is being pumped into the whole of the BBC system. The license fee payer hasn't got hasn't been asked to comment on this. So this is positive discrimination by the BBC. And this is the same document. This is comments from certain people pictured. Some of the recommendations may seem subtle shifts, but it's clear from what I've heard that they will be transformative for us as an organisation. Now, I'm just going to label this Trojan mice. This is a real description you can find online of using very small, subtle steps in order to ultimately trigger big changes. So these people are plotting as to what they're going to do, and ultimately they're using the BBC to do it. But let's also add here that what these people don't realise is that the LGBT agenda itself is going to be replaced by the transhumanism agenda, which is just starting to emerge through the door. So I'm going to say some very, very ill-informed people, because they're pushing an agenda which ultimately is going to replace themselves. But BBC, is that free? Is that free media, Mike? Is that a fair, open, unbiased media? No. I don't think so.
No. Okay. Well, good news, Brian. Smart Cities World here is reporting landmark hearing finds use of facial recognition technology lawful. How could life get any better? The UK Home Office is planning to channel £97 million, they say, into a wider biometric technology strategy to safeguard our streets. They're going to safeguard our streets with this. So what's this all about? Basically, there was a court case brought about South Wales Police use of facial recognition technology, let's just have a look at the comments from the Chief Constable to get an impression of what the result was. He said, I recognise that the use of AI and face matching technologies around the world is of great interest and at times concerned, but I'm pleased that the court has recognised the responsibility that South Wales Police has shown in our programme. With the benefit of this judgment, we will continue to explore how to ensure ongoing fairness and transparency of our approach. We have always wrapped some good common sense decision making by experienced police officers around the systems, but we have also underpinned this with careful legal work and the involvement of a range of bodies, including our own Police and Crime Commissioner and Ethics Committee. There is and should be a political and public debate about wider questions of privacy and security. It would be wrong in principle for the police to set the bounds of our use of new technology for ourselves. So they have been given permission by the courts to continue to use this. The Office of the Biometrics Commissioner has issued a response to this situation, and they said that the High Court in Cardiff has now found that South Wales Police's use to date of the automated facial recognition has been consistent with the requirements of the Human Rights Act and the data protection legislation. It also found that the current legal regime is adequate to ensure appropriate and non-arbitrary use of automated facial recognition systems, and that have been used in trials in South Wales by South Wales Police. The judgment itself considers solely the use of AFR by the police rather than any other public or indeed private bodies. Moreover, the judgment is specific to the particular circumstances in which South Wales used their AFR system. While South Wales Police should be commended for the thoughtful, considered way in which they've carried out their trials to date, there remains a wider issue which is not limited to whether there's a legal basis for the police to carry out trials of AFR. And they went on to say, the use of biometrics and artificial intelligence analysis is not the only strategic question the country presently faces. However, that is no reason not to have an informed public debate to help guide our lawmakers. I hope ministers will take active role in leading such a debate in order to examine how the technologies can serve the public interest while protecting the rights of individuals, citizens, to a private life without the unnecessary interference of either state or private corporations. What's interesting to me here, Brian, is that while the Office of the Biometrics Commissioner is being quite positive about the approach that South Wales Police have taken, they're making a point about protecting the rights of individual citizens to a private life. And I just wanted to mention Rory Stewart, because of course as a Tory MP he has done quite a bit to move this agenda of surveillance by the state forward. But if you remember back in 2013 when he attended the Bilderberg conference, he was extremely concerned that people were asking questions about his attendance at that conference, and he was claiming the right to a private life as a private citizen. So you were talking about hypocrisy a moment ago. The hypocrisy never seems to end.
Indeed. We've got a government of occupation, so they can do anything they want, Mike. Yeah. Well, let's end with the BBC. This caught my eye from the news today. It was under long reads. The first one was the first European Union, which I nearly delved into. I'll come on to that. Seems good that the BBC is continuing to stir the European Union pot. But it was the next one that caught my eye, the billionaire hated by the hard right. And of course, this takes you through to an article on billionaire George Soros. But the BBC's headline is, "Why is billionaire George Soros a bogeyman for the hard right?" I've labelled this anonymous BBC fake news. No journalist is named. Nobody wants to put their name to it. But I found this fascinating that part of the early opening is in the UK, Soros is known as the man who broke the Bank of England in 1992. Along with other currency speculators, he borrowed pounds and then sold them, helping to drive down the price of sterling on currency markets and ultimately forcing the UK to crash out of the European exchange rate mechanism. That must have caused a lot of suffering, in my opinion, to a great many people. But that's the first BBC paragraph. And then it says the Hungarian emigre who survived the Holocaust and fled the communists is thought to have made a total about $440 billion through financial speculation. And he's used his fortune to fund thousands of education, health, human rights and democracy projects. Isn't that a brilliant juxtaposition of you interfere with the money markets, causing misery, and you make a huge amount of money?
I'm going to go further.
Go on.
Because that's quite an amazing paragraph. How did he survive the Holocaust? He survived the Holocaust by working for the Germans, collecting the possessions of his fellow Jews and helping them remove possessions from fellow Jews in Hungary at the time. He was only a child, I'll give him that, but that's what he did. And then his subsequent career has been about stealing money from one section of the community in order to pursue his political agenda, using the profits that he's made from stealing money from the people over here. So that seems to have been the story of his life right from the very beginning.
And of course, a lot of this stuff is openly admitted in various interviews. So if I just add to that, it seemed to me what we've got here is speculation. The BBC's version of this is financial speculation is good. And then if you use those ill-gotten gains to finance social change in your own image, that's even better.
Yeah.
So there we go. Established in 1979, his Open Society foundations now operate in more than 120 countries around the world. But this bold philanthropy in support of liberal democratic causes has increasingly made him the bogeyman of the right. Well, he's not democratic in any shape or form. So what have we got? Hundreds of thousands of pounds, millions of pounds of free BBC advertising, which says if you want to go and play money speculation and help a few people to suffer, you can have a big article in the BBC.
Absolutely.
It's outrageous. We'll end there. Perhaps we should. We'll say thank you all for joining us. If you're not aware of the GcMAF story around David Noakes and Lynn Thayer, please have a look on the UK Column website. And also thank you to everybody that did get up to London to help support David, Andy and Crane. We'll leave it there. We'll be back at the same time on Friday. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.